Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Knock on Bucs Victory Monday edition of the podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Nach, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took down the Washington Commanders 37-20 in impressive fashion. And Bucs fans, let's just bake. Baker Mayfield was outstanding yesterday. Obviously, he's the headline. And he's going to be talked about all Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week as he put on quite the performance. 4 touchdowns, 24-30, only 6 incompletions, hit 7 different wide receivers, hit some nice deep plays. Obviously, we saw the first Mike Evans touchdown and how impressive that was because that ball had to be in that spot for Mike Evans to go get it. Now, we know what Mike Evans can do, but the ball still has to be in the best spot, and Baker put it right for Mike Evans and where he could get it. So, listen, I was elated. I wasn't sure what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to do walking in. Obviously, as we know fans, Tampa hasn't been talked about. There were prognosticators that were picking Washington to win this game on Sunday. And Tampa just comes out and blows the doors wide open, exceeds a lot of people's expectations. I was watching the 1 o'clock game between Pittsburgh and Atlanta, and I was not impressed at all with Atlanta's offense. Their offensive line. Now, remember, I heard this all offseason. Their offensive line, top 5 offensive line, was absolutely demolished, and Kirk Cousins was already seeing ghosts in the fourth quarter. TJ Watt had 2 sacks that were nullified by penalties. That guy should have had 4 sacks yesterday. So I think the fact that Tampa was able to come out and exceed expectations was fantastic, and I really think it shows just, how little and how much some people can really know and not know at the same time. Props to Gerald McCoy for sticking with the Bucs. Obviously, he's been taking his victory laps on X, and I don't blame him. I completely support him. I don't know why some fans don't like Gerald, but I'm in Gerald McCoy's camp. Outside of Baker Mayfield being a real big positive, obviously Mike Evans with 2 touchdowns, continuing off his impressive season from a year ago. Starts off with 64 yards receiving. That's not bad. Chris Godwin looked great too. 83 yards, a touchdown. Really, really bailed out Baker in some tough spots. I'm thinking about in the second quarter, that 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14, and Baker's able to elude pressure and just, sidearms it as Baker's on his one side like this, and he's able to get it over to Chris Godwin for the first down. Really impressive. And Jalen McMillan getting wide open. He should have had 2 touchdowns yesterday. He can't let that first one, but I think you can draw that up to rookie nerves. Obviously, he made up for it with that big touchdown catch later on, and he's going to be a real weapon as the season rolls on. I thought Bucky Irving and Rachaad White were a good 1-2 punch. I didn't really have a problem with them. I know Rachaad White had 15 carries for 31 yards. I know the numbers don't look great, but also, too, you got to give Washington some credit. They were able to nullify. I didn't think it was necessarily all on Rachaad White on some of those carries. He did lose a couple. You have to give some props to Washington's defense. Their defensive line has 2 outstanding defensive tackles. We'll get into the interior offensive line and my thoughts on that here in just a minute, but you got to give props to them because I think they wreaked some havoc. They made things very difficult. And you have to remember, this is a very young group. You have a rookie center who we all think is going to be great, but he's not going to be great day one. I know he's a Gruden grinder, but he's not going to be a day one All-Pro just yet. So we got to keep that in mind. I thought Cody Mauch, I think a lot of people are giving Cody Mauch a lot of flack. And listen, I don't think he had the best game he would have wanted. I think he'd tell you that. But at the same time, I don't think it was necessarily all him. But I'll get into my interior line thoughts here in a little bit on some of my things to worry about. But my buck of the day goes to Christian Izien. Christian Izien having to step in as the DBs were going down left and right. We'll get into that here in just a second as well, but props to Christian Izien doing what he needed to do. Again, he was a guy I wasn't sure was going to make the roster, but he did, and obviously Todd Bowles and that player development program, they know what they're doing. And so Christian Izien steps in, gets a pass breakup, had a couple of tackles as well. I don't know if we can count on him to be an outside corner as we get ready for the Detroit Lions. I'll be interesting to see what the Bucs do. Obviously, a lot to handle with that because do they bring someone in? But Christian Izien, buck of the day for me because, again, having to step in a role where he really hasn't played at all, where he's usually just a nickel guy and all of a sudden has to step on the outside playing cornerback in that second half of that game. I think all the props to Christian Izien. Now, as I mentioned, the interior offensive line and the defensive backfield, those are 2 areas that we obviously got to worry about. One is different from the other because The defensive backfield, and let's just start there, is just from a lack of bodies, because unfortunately a lot of bodies fell on Sunday. Hayes is out. I feel for Breece Hall with the injury that he got. It sounds like he's going to miss significant time. I feel for him. Hopefully he has a speedy recovery. I really liked what he did in camp and in preseason, and I thought he did some nice things yesterday as well. Unfortunate that Josh Hayes went down. I haven't heard what his injury is and how much time he might miss. Obviously, we know Zion McCollum went down and was being evaluated for a concussion. Hopefully, he can make it back from concussion protocol. We'll see how that goes. And Antoine Winfield Jr., it was reported, was in a walking boot in the locker room, so hopefully he'll be okay and be ready to rock and roll. But that defensive backfield depth is already being tested, and the Buccaneers are going to have to figure out what they want to do. Obviously, they got Funderburk. He was inactive yesterday. I imagine he'll be active this week as they get ready for the Detroit Lions. But I'm curious to see where Tampa Bay goes. Do they go out and get a free agent? Do they just try and maybe get a guy one of their guys back? Maybe they can get Keenan Isaac back. I don't know who's going to get cut this week for the Carolina Panthers. They had it rough. Maybe we can get him back. Who knows? But I think that Tampa Bay obviously is going to have to find some more bodies. Obviously, we got to wait till the middle of the week to really find out what the full injury reports are and how many bodies we may really have available this Sunday in Detroit. The interior offensive line. As I mentioned, I saw people giving Cody Mock some flack. I thought Ben Bredesen wasn't great. Again, not bad, but wasn't great. I think the interior offensive line struggled. And I think there's a reason for that. It was Allen and Payne doing their thing. Those are two Pro Bowl defensive tackles. They did add Farrell off the edge. That's a good defensive front. They got some aging linebackers, and their secondary needs work, but that's a good defensive front for Washington. They got two Pro Bowl defensive tackles, and I think that's really tough on a second-year player and a rookie center as well. Ben Bredesen's seen those guys, obviously playing for the New York Giants last year, but it was a mixed bag. I like some of the things that I saw from Barton. I like some of the things I saw from Mauk. I like some of the things I saw from Bredesen, and there were some things that left you to be desired from all three of those guys. I think we just got to remember this is a young group. This isn't going to be succinct. This isn't going to be the days of Ryan Jensen and Ali Marpet and Alex Kappa. It's just not going to be that way. But I'm optimistic given the fact that we did run the football not great, but efficiently. Over 100 yards. We didn't have to deal with that 77-yard average we saw in 2022, but we did run for 112 yards. Bucky Irving looked really, really good. Again, I think this is what you want. You want Rachaad White and Bucky Irving to be that 1-2 punch, so that way these guys can spell each other. And like I said, I'm good with riding the hot hand. May not be happy for fantasy football owners, but Bucky Irving and Rachaad White as a 1-2 punch in real football, I think is going to be key, because Rachaad White did his thing in the receiving end of the game, as Rachaad White had, I believe it was, let me see here, he had 6 catches for 75 yards. He obviously had that big screen play as well, and I think that's where we're going to see him be most effective. And Bucky Irving, again, I think he had a long for, I believe it was 31 yards. Yeah, he did. And so he broke off that big run, and I just like what I'm seeing from both guys. I don't necessarily think that this means one bad thing for Rachaad White over, with Bucky Irving. I think it's just we're going to see a good 1-2 punch, and that's what you want from this offense. So, again, Bucs fans, a lot to be really happy about here on a Victory Monday. I've got my big coffee mug ready to rock and roll, and we get ready for the Detroit Lions. And I think the biggest thing, fans, and obviously I think that the team has to realize this, and this isn't new information. I'm sure Coach Todd Bowles is going to be telling his team this all week. Don't buy in the hype. A lot of people are going to be singing the praises of Baker Mayfield. Don't buy the hype. This was exactly what happened after they started 3-1 last year. Everybody was talking about how good the Bucs were and the surprise and everything else. We just got to remember that was the Washington Commanders. They are not a very good football team yet. Jaden Daniels did look like the real thing, but they are not a very good football team just yet. They've got a lot of pieces that they still need to figure out, obviously defensively and offensively. But I will say that I think getting ready for Detroit, this is a big test. Detroit played overtime last night. They needed all of it to beat the Rams, and we know the Rams are going to be a good football team, so this is a big test. If Tampa can go in there and hang with Detroit and pull out a win, because again, you got to come up with some sneaky wins here. You look at Detroit, you look at Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, obviously the division rivals. You got to come away with some sneaky wins this year. And you also look at the Chargers getting a win last night. You look at the Cowboys and what they did to the Cleveland Browns. I'm thinking Cleveland really wants Baker Mayfield back, but they can't have him. But Tampa, this would be a game for Tampa to really kind of get in there and sneak a win out over a very, very good football team. So Bucs fans, temper expectations because we do get a very, very good football team. If we beat them and that offense looks, the offense looks like they did yesterday against Detroit, then we can start getting really, really excited. But an absolutely great Week 1 win for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and a great way to start off the season. And we get ready for Detroit. I am your host, Anthony Nach. This has been the Nach on Bucs podcast. If you could, please give me a like and a subscribe. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Nach on Bucs. And you can follow my written work on Substack at the Nach on Bucs. Again, Bucs fans, hope you have a great week and go Bucs.